Debatable, and some of you might try to debate me on it here and now. That's okay. But I consider myself to be a reasonably intelligent person, okay? Just generally speaking, I have a college education. I've raised 4 children, mostly. Yeah, okay. I have walked this planet for 48 years. I've been married for 27 of them, right? I've learned how to play musical instruments. I can frame a wall and run some basic electrical wiring and some things like that. I could that I'm relatively intelligent. That were half my size come down there and try to catch me and then actually jump. Why would I do that? Some of you are going, we're wondering the same thing. We were that day, right, Dave? Yes. Dave was the only one that probably could have caught me. I had him up here. Okay. Didn't make any sense. Why here's another one. Why if I think I'm so smart, why, this happened about 10 years ago, I had decided I wanted to buy a Jeep. And I was going to negotiate, and I was going to come out with a deal I wanted. I walked out of there with a deal for $150 a month more than I planned on. Or person, would I do that? You've been there, haven't you? Yeah, I think about it. If I think I'm so even a little bit smart, why do I get up every morning, look in the mirror, and think I need to do something about this? But then a few hours later, I'm sitting down at lunch, and I eat an entire bucket of chips with cheese dip. Why? Why do I do that? Very real paradox at work here. And I want you to think about it. I do believe I'm reasonably intelligent, and I make stupid, regrettable decisions on a daily basis. The scary thing is, sometimes my decisions impact other people. Sometimes my bad choices we make is bad. But there are so many times that we make significant decisions in our life without taking the time to consider that those decisions impact more than just the here and now. I was thinking about this the other day. I think I've shared this with you guys before, but the other day I was thinking about the context of this message, and my college, when I was back 18 years old, graduating high school, getting ready for college, and thinking about where do I want to go to school. I had 3 different colleges that I had applied to and been accepted to, and each one of them was going to take me in a vastly different direction in life. But I would have gone there and maybe I was kind of interested in like architecture, something like that. That's kind of cool. Milligan College had pre-med, and I was kind of interested in like orthopedic medicine, sports medicine. You want me operating on your knee, Oma? Is that okay? That'd be frightening. You wake up and there I am. Hey, okay, we'll get this straightened up. Or I go to Atlanta Christian College, go into ministry, youth ministry, or whatever else that brought. Now, obviously, I made a choice, and it wasn't I don't regret the choice I made. Obviously, went to Atlanta Christian College, and here I am in ministry still today. And I'm not saying I regret that, but think about it. It affected more than just my career path. I mean, that's where I met my wife. If I'd gone to Tech or Milligan, I would have never met my wife. And think about then I would have never had these wonderful children, or the little squishy Millie. I would have never had any of that. Or I don't know what it would have looked like, but so many off of that one. And when I was 18, I wasn't thinking I knew college was a big decision. I knew it would impact a lot about my life. I had no idea what that decision was going to do, what kind of track that was going to set me on. We don't have the benefit of knowing the future when we do make those decisions. But I just want you to think about it. What about you? What are some of the life-defining moments you can think back on in your life right now? That decision to continue dating someone or not. That decision to get married. That decision to take a new job or to leave a job you're in. The decision to make a major purchase or to not make that major purchase. The decision to entertain an affair outside of your marriage because that person makes you feel good about yourself. We face decisions. Momentous, life-changing decisions. Sometimes it's the mundane, the routine decisions that impact our lives more than we realize, the daily stuff. Sometimes it's how we decide to spend our time and money. Sometimes it's about our food and exercise choices. Sometimes it's the way we treat our spouse or speak to our kids. Sometimes it's about having that drink or allowing that lustful glance to become a fantasy. Sometimes it's about a decision to get up and take my family to church or not. And sometimes it's about me whether I'm going to lose my temper in a certain situation or say something I can't take back. How many of you struggle with the same paradox I'm talking about here? How many of you believe that you're relatively intelligent, yet you find yourself why you did it? How many of you have woken up in the middle of the night filled with regret? Tossing and turning because of something you said to somebody, because of that questionable financial decision you made, because of the relationship choice that you've made, or just wondering how you got yourself in that situation. Am I alone here? How many of you can relate? If you can relate to that, will you stand up? I want you to get out of your seat right now. If you can relate to that paradox in life, stand up. Look around. You're not alone. I don't want you to say what it is you regret right now. That might get us in trouble. Go ahead and have a seat. Listen, we face this paradox. It's true for all of us. Over the next few weeks, the staff and I, we went through we do a weekly Bible study together before we start our staff meetings, and we went through a book by Andy Stanley called Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. And I referenced this a while back. But what I want to do over the next few weeks is I want to use this book kind of as a basis for challenging you to think about the decisions you're making in your life, how you make them, why you make them. See, I want us to understand why it is we all find ourselves, even though we're reasonably intelligent people, making decisions that we regret. Making decisions that even in the moment we knew were not smart, not very wise, but we go ahead and do it anyway. And so what we're going to do over the next 5 weeks is we're going to take a look at 5 questions I want to challenge you to apply to your life, to your decision making, that'll help you become a better and a more God-honoring decision maker in your life. Here's the good news. As you just looked around the room, you saw you're not alone. You're not the only one that lives with regret. You're not the only one that can look back on your life and see it littered with things and decisions that have put you where you are right now, for good or bad. See, the Apostle Paul dealt with it. Romans chapter 7 is a passage I keep coming back to as I think about this topic. I just want to share this with you, verses 14 to 25. Paul writes, "We know that the law is spiritual, but I," Paul says, "I am unspiritual, sold as a slave to sin. I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is, it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I had the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it's sin living in me that does it. So I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work within me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work in me. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord. Paul wrestled with this too. I'll give you 4 truths to go along with. If you're filling in the outline in your bulletin today and the next few weeks are going to be some good ones to take some notes on. I challenge you to do that. I encourage you to do it. But we're going to start right here today. Guys, your decisions are writing your story. The story of your life, the story that your life is going to tell to everyone around you. It's a legacy. In your decisions, the decisions you make, not just the big ones, but the decisions you make on a daily basis are writing your story. And there are 4 truths I want to give you related to that. And the first truth is this: you are where you are in life mostly because of the decisions you have made, both the good and the bad. Let's start with that. And that's something a lot of us don't want to hear, because I believe that leads us to truth number 2. The truth number 2 is this: we have a hard time learning from our bad decisions because we usually find something or someone else to blame. So that's the problem, is our decisions are making a life. Our decisions have what brought us to the moment, the place where we stand right now. And we reject that because a lot of times we want to blame everything else but our own decision making for the circumstances we find ourselves in. And truth number 3 is this. I talked about this a second ago. Our intelligence in decision making, we're smart people, right? Is often overridden by our emotions and our appetites. Paul talked about it as a sin problem. It's our nature. We want what we want, and that causes us to ignore the red flag warnings, the alarm bells that start ringing in our head when we know we're getting ready to make a mistake. But I want it. I've talked myself into it already, and that leads us to the 4th truth I want to give you, is that we all fall somewhere on a spectrum of decision making. I want you to picture it in your head. Okay, all the way over here on this side, I want you to picture someone who's very spontaneous, someone who, what's the word? I wrote it down. Help me if I follow my notes a little bit. Yeah, impulsive, okay? Impulsive and spontaneous. Someone who takes very little information in. They just, whatever hits them, whatever the mood is right, whatever they're feeling, that's how they're going to act. That's on the far end of this extreme over here. Now we're going to go all the way over here to the other end of the spectrum. Over here is someone who operates off of being super cautious, maybe even fearful. That kind of person who on this extreme seems to never be able to make a decision, never be able to take a step because they can never get enough information to make them confident. Now, every one of us in this room falls somewhere in that continuum. Picture where you are. Maybe, so if we take from that wall to this wall and somewhere in between, super spontaneous, I don't really take in nearly enough info before I make a decision, all the way over to I am frozen in place. From where you think you are. You're somewhere on it. Okay? My guess is, there might be a few of us in here who fall dead center, but most of us fall one side or the other a little bit at least. The problem is either side is going to cause us to struggle in our decision making. And that's what I want us to think about today. How do I get myself to a place where I'm living a life that honors God, that leaves a legacy that I want to leave behind, that writes a story that I want other people to tell? You see, I believe there are 3 areas, and over the next few weeks, I'm going to focus a lot on these 3 areas of life that I believe most of us struggle. That I believe most of us, if we live with regret, it's going to fall under one of these 3 categories. The first one is this: dumb purchases. All right, let's think about it. That's number 1, is we're going to struggle with dumb purchases. We buy things, well, I want it. Can you afford it? I don't know, it doesn't matter, I want it. Okay, the other one is doomed relationships. We find out whether we're talking about dating or marriage or whether we talk about friendships or whatever it is, we find ourselves in doomed relationships because we ignored all the warning signs leading up to that, and we decided this is what I wanted. She was so cute, right? Oh man, he was so funny. Yeah, but how does that feel now? Man, we find ourselves regretting these things. And destructive habits. Those things that we talk ourselves into, the things we say, well, it's not going to hurt me now. Into one of these three categories. But I just want to ask this question this morning. What story do you want your life to tell? You see, this series is aimed at helping you with a few things. I really want three things to come out of helping you as we go through this series: better decisions, fewer regrets. The first one is this: I hope it helps you identify, to maybe even say out loud somewhere in your life, this is the story I want my life to tell. I hope you'll think about that and say, I want my decisions. This is the story I want to tell. Therefore, my decisions need to start pointing towards that, the way I'm living my life. That's first. The second thing I hope it does is I hope it helps you greatly reduce the regret that you experience in your life because of your decisions that are sabotaging your story. I hope it helps you do that. And the third thing, and I think this is most important, is I hope it helps you identify how your story fits in with God's upper story and His purpose for your life, and that your decisions start reflecting that. That's what I'm hoping we get out of this series over the next few weeks. So today, we're going to start with question number 1 of the 5. It's the integrity question, and it sounds like this. Go ahead and show it. Am I being honest with myself? Really? Whenever we're making these decisions in our life, and sometimes it is just about what food we're going to eat in a meal, whether I'm going to go to the gym today or not, how I'm going to speak to someone, how I'm going to react in a tough situation. It's not just the big stuff. But am I being really honest with myself is the first question I want to challenge you to pause and ask yourself when you're trying to make decisions in your life. There's a story that actually plays out over several books in the Old Testament. We see it play out in Jeremiah chapters 26 through 36. We see it play out in in 2 Kings chapter 24. We see it play out in Daniel chapter 1. All kind of telling the same story, different bits and pieces. It's about a king of Judah named King Jehoiakim. Now, this is after a string of kings had come along in Israel, well after David and Solomon and Saul and those guys. But King Jehoiakim, it says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He and the nation of Israel had turned their back on the Lord. Now there was this prophet, this advisor that the king had, who did still represent God, who still listened to God, who still talked to God. His name was Jeremiah. And we have a book in the Bible in the Old Testament that he's written. We can see some of the things he had to say. Jeremiah was King Jehoiakim's advisor. And he had received a word from the Lord. Now, what this was based on was at a time in history where the Babylonian Empire was on the rise, and it had come in and taken over the whole region. It had taken over Judah, Israel, the nation of Israel, and the kingdom of Judah. And basically it had made them, and they didn't really enslave them, but what happened, the way it worked was Babylon was now kind of in control of everything. They weren't independent. They weren't on their own. Israel wasn't anymore. And so they had to pay a tribute. Babylon required, you pay us a tribute, and what we'll do is we'll provide military protection for you, but you have to pay this tribute. Otherwise, we'll leave you alone to live your lives. Well, King Jehoiakim didn't like this arrangement very well. He wanted to be the king, the one in charge. But Jeremiah's word from the Lord that he had received, King Jehoiakim's advisor, said, God was telling King Jehoiakim, I want you to submit to the Babylonians. You're going to be in this condition for the next 70 years, but then I'm going to deliver you. I'm going to bring you out of this. But I need you to trust me. Because if you don't, bad things are going to happen. If you don't submit to the Babylonians, King Nebuchadnezzar, who was in charge of the Babylonian Empire at this point, would come in and do horrible things. Trust me. Listen to me. Do you think King Jehoiakim wanted to listen to this advice? No, he didn't. About 3 years later, he makes a decision. I'm tired of it. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to pay my tribute. Jeremiah's, you're going to regret it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm my own man. I can handle it. And Nebuchadnezzar comes in and crushes Israel, destroys Jerusalem, takes King Jehoiakim, puts him in prison, blinds him, and now he's part of Nebuchadnezzar's king collection. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar did. He collected kings, he blinded them, and then he'd bring them out at parties and parade them around. That's the kind of guy he was. Now, King Jehoiakim's son, King Jehoiachin, I don't know why you just didn't call him Junior, but it would have been easier. But he brings him in. Jehoiachin now leads for three months. And he stands up and it says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He does the exact same thing. Jeremiah says, don't do it. You saw what your dad did. Have you not learned? It's not going to happen to me. I am not paying tribute to Babylon. The same thing happens. He ends up getting, the Babylonians come in again, crush Israel, crush Judah, take Jehoiachin, throw him in jail, blind him. He's now part of his collection with his dad. A third generation. King Zedekiah. King Zedekiah comes along. Rules for a few years. He actually ended up ruling for about 11 years, but it says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. These guys weren't interested in hearing from God. They were only interested in their own power. Does the same thing, and the same thing happens. Jeremiah was begging him, please listen. Please learn. Please quit lying to yourself. See, I like this verse in Jeremiah 17:9. This prophet, this advisor, Jeremiah, says these simple words. He says, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? I imagine he had these kings in mind as he said these words. Today, I'm going to give you three that we ask ourselves the integrity question. That we stop and say, am I being honest with myself, or am I acting like these kings? And the first question is this: we are prone to confirmation bias. You know what confirmation bias is? Yeah, I bet you, when I describe it, I'm guessing you're going to know. We all have a tendency to take in information that supports what we already believe and to reject who or what doesn't support what we already believe. I'll give you an example. Most of us fall into the bias, I'm drawing a total blank, the confirmation bias. Most of us fall into the confirmation bias in our politics. Now, let's think back to a president maybe a few years back. Let's think about President Obama. Okay? Obama. And that he was evil and everything. My guess is that you sought out media sources that were somewhat complimentary to him and that caused problems and didn't work out so well. Just the opposite if you were someone who did not like President Obama. If you were someone who thought he was out to destroy America, you looked for media sources that supported that thinking. You rejected anything you heard that was complimentary of him. If someone supported him, you probably kind of even thought that person was questionable in their character. Am I right? We tend to do this, right? Wonderful and never did anything wrong. And on the other end of it, we think President Obama is an evil person that wants to destroy America and everything about it. And the fact is, if we're honest, neither is true. Neither's true. He wasn't perfect. He's even said that there are some things he regretted and made mistakes in his presidency. He's human. He's a man. And he wasn't out to destroy America. He didn't hate Americans. Even if we have a completely different view, even if you have a completely different view of the way he did things, that wasn't what he was out to do. But that's what that is, the confirmation bias. And guys, we have a confirmation bias in our decision making as well. How do you handle it when you want to buy, you've got your heart set on this car that you want to buy. And you know that you really looked at the numbers, and yeah, it's probably going to be a stretch financially, but man, you really want it. And then your mom says, are you sure you can afford that? How do you respond? Of course I can. You get mad at mom, right? As if she's the blame for you not making enough money, right? Well, what about this? You're dating someone, and all of a sudden some red flags come up. They're 38 and live in their mom's basement. Whatever, things like that. And what does your mom say? Are you sure he's so good for you? Who are you? You're going to blame her? Well, I love him. Quit saying that. Mom, you're the one that's wrong here, right? Why do we do that? Confirmation bias. We take the things in that we want to see, we ignore the red flags. And we're all guilty of it to some degree or another. The truth is, guys, most of us are more interested in proving that we are right than admitting what is true. We're not on truth quests in our life. We're on confirmation quests. It applies to our politics. It applies to our positions on social issues like gun control or abortion rights. And yeah, it applies to our decision making. If you want to make better decisions, you have to learn to be honest with yourself and recognize your problem with confirmation bias by asking questions like, can I afford this? Is this too risky? Is this person good for me? And seek out honest answers to those questions, not just the answers that confirm what you've already decided. And here's a tip. As soon as you start trying to sell yourself on anything, that's when you should hit the pause button on making that decision, because you rarely have to sell yourself on a good idea. Think about that. Maybe it's time for you to stop and say, I need to spend a moment and be honest with myself here. The second thing in asking ourselves the integrity question, am I being honest with myself, is to understand what Jeremiah said, is our heart is deceitful. Paul quotes from the Psalms in Romans chapter 3 when he says this. It says, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have altogether become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. And that sounds kind of harsh. Well, most of us, I think I'm a fairly decent person. That seems kind of harsh. He's saying you have a sin nature that you can't overcome. Your heart's deceiving you. If you think you've got it all figured out and you think you've got every decision nailed down in your life right now and you're coming at this from a perfectly godly and moral place, a right place, you're deceiving yourself because your heart is deceitful. So if we convinced ourselves, I can handle it. Oh, I won't get caught. I know everyone else get caught, but it won't happen to me. I'm smarter than that. It's why we risked speeding on the interstate, isn't it? It's why we accept that drink at the party. It's why we allow a little bit of innocent flirting to go a step or two further. Nobody is better at justifying your decisions than you are. You can look at someone else doing the same thing and you can say, man, they're heading for trouble. Yet somehow you find a way to justify your actions doing the same thing, right? Why? Because our hearts are deceitful. And guys, there's a difference between being dishonest and being deceitful. Our hearts aren't dishonest, typically. Deceit, on the other hand, is sneaky. Deceit is when you justify your dishonesty. Deceit does not. Let's try again. Say it. Justifying is just a lying. There you go. Say it again. Justifying is just a lying. It is, isn't it? We justify things. It's just us lying to our own hearts. If you have to sell yourself on it, stop and ask. Being honest with the sooner you can start looking out for it so that you can be honest with yourself as you're making these decisions and Our condition is beyond cure. That's what Jeremiah said. The heart is deceitful, and it's beyond cure. The truth is, we have a rebellious sin that Jesus has left for us. You have a way to combat your deceitful heart. If you will ask the integrity question when making decisions, am I being honest with myself? You can seek out the Holy Spirit to guide you, to speak that truth into your heart if you will just listen. There are 3 simple things you can do to seek out the guidance of the Holy Spirit in decision making. Is first of all, admit it. Admit that you have a deceitful heart. Admit that you have a tendency to lie to yourself. The second thing is this: ask it. Ask the question, am I being honest with myself? Ask myself, can I really afford this? Is she or he really good for me? Am I going to regret this later? And the third thing is be curious. Listen to information that doesn't necessarily support what you already think. Listen to other points of view. Listen to your mom if you need to. That's what it's going to take if we're going to be honest with ourselves. Guys, you will never be a leader worth following if you don't lead yourself well first. Make no mistake, you're a leader. Everyone in this room, your grandkids, they're watching. There are people that you work with who are watching and paying attention. You have friends who are watching you. Leadership is not about the position you hold. It's about the influence you have on others. It's about the story that your life is writing one decision at a time. And you can't lead yourself well if you're lying to yourself. Jesus said these words in John chapter 8. It says, to the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching and you really are my disciples, then you will know the truth. And freed from the regret of sin and bad decisions, start asking yourself good questions and be honest with yourself when you answer them.